Welcome to UDL Leadership session number 3. Adam has put in the link for you, and I know as people come in, we need to repeat that link because unfortunately, um, of course, Zoom only lets you see links as you've already come in. It doesn't show you the old one. So he's going to be popping that one in a few times for us. But welcome, welcome. It's so great to see people tonight. I know after break, it can be kind of that whiplash of starting the school year up again. It can be kind of crazy as we come in. So thank you so much for having that energy to join us tonight. I'm going to jump in here. Thanks so much for putting that learner survey in. We're going to take a look and see how people have responded. Love doing these surveys with adults and, of course, with student learners, but love to do kind of check-ins with people and really recognize how people are bringing themselves into learning. Great UDL strategy. So my first question was asking, how are you doing? Are you ready for learning? And we have no one that's totally full energy, and I would not expect that this time of the year. But we have a person that is totally fine, ready to participate. We also have a couple that are a bit tired. Me too. You're gonna have to help me. We'll keep our energy up tonight. Um, I might do a little more listening. So totally fine. You are where you're at. So if you want to keep your camera off, if you're feeling like you want to do more responses in chat, I totally get it. But I also love the unmuting. And of course, we do love to hear everybody's stories. So hopefully we can get some of those going tonight too. I also asked, is there anything particular that you hope we discuss? And I think everybody's just kind of ready to look at the stages. And so we are just going to go ahead and jump in. So thank you for taking a minute for that learner survey for me. And we're going to get back to our slides. All right. So at the end of every session, as you know, I ask for your feedback. I want to make sure I'm doing everything I can to make sure these sessions are made for you. And so based on your last feedback, we did have 100% of the group felt that we met our goals, which is great. That always helps me feel like we're on track. That's great. The couple of things people asked to keep and continue through sessions, keep sharing the engagement strategies within the actual session, the clear explanations of what UDL is. I'm gonna really try to keep those clear. And hopefully, if you have questions, please throw those in chat or, of course, unmute yourself and let me know. Keeping the Hangouts and having people actually share out, definitely going to do that. I'll give you that option when we go to some of that little work time piece where you can either um, just turn your sound down and work on your own for a little bit, or if you want to unmute and just listen and participate in a Hangout, we will do that all together as well. Okay, we'll have both of those options again. And then there was a lot of people that really appreciated the resources. And of course, I'm going to keep sharing all those resources, added a couple of things based on your feedback. So I want to make sure you get to see those different pieces. And if there are particular resources that you're finding most helpful or certain things that you want to see in the feedback, also really articulate that for me too. Okay. One change, there was a request for more detail on the steps within the playbook. So I have added something that I want to show you, and hopefully the request for that, this will be a support for that. And if it's not, whoever put that in there, please let me know if you want something a little more or different information on there. And I'm also going to try to really review where we are in the playbook. So those steps, hopefully, as we keep working through those, hopefully those steps will make a little more sense. Okay, so that was based on your feedback. And like I said, I have things that I'm going to keep and things that I'm going to change based on exactly what you said. And remember that feedback loop is such a powerful piece. So when you are working on your coaching plans for your teachers, for your learners, this was one of the, and I know I've said this a few times and I'll keep saying it, but using feedback loops was the biggest change for me and resulted in the biggest change that our staff shared. That when we actually closed that feedback loop of sharing things like this with them of, hey, here's what we're going to do. Here's what we're going to keep. Here's what we're going to change based on what you said. We had amazing responses from staff that they really felt like PD was being changed and altered just for them. And they felt like things were really those things were really matching what their requests were. So hopefully this modeling of this makes sense for you and you can see how you can put that into your PD. Okay. All right, our goals for this course, and of course, repeat this every time, explore the structures to support your development of PD plans. So professional learning plans that focus on UDL and inclusion for your staff. So that's what we're really exploring, the different parts that go into putting that together. And then, of course, giving you a chance to collaborate and have conversations with your peers that are in that same journey with you. And I know that's one of the pieces that people share can be so valuable, is just hearing where other people are, finding those things that resonate with people and things that really make sense, right? Where you're listening to other people's struggles and, of course, their successes. So we want to make sure we provide opportunities for that. Okay, and our goals just for this session, for session 3, we're now in stage 2, and we're going to get a chance to kind of look at those last parts of stage 2. And in stage 2, it was all about the when and how we can actually provide professional learning. And we'll look at some resources on that and do some discussion around that. And then we'll also have time tonight to begin stage 3. And stage 3 is all about the focus on what kind of content and the sequence of that content that you could actually do with UDL, and how there are some pretty great resources on how to sequence, some like best case studies around how to put those kind of things together based on some of the resources that I've seen. There are some really great sequence suggestions for putting those things together. And then again, in session 3, we want to make sure we have that collaborative opportunity with our peers. All right. So the outcomes that we've been working on is opportunities to consider how to craft professional learning and, of course, get to network with your peers. And we have our playbook document, right? And I know there were a couple of people that said they were going to join in for the first time. So I do want to make sure, Adam, can you put up link number 3, which is that website resource? And I will put that out of order there for you. Sorry about that. But I want to make sure that you remember or see for the first time, if you're brand new tonight, that we have this website resource for you that has what we're working through, which is called the playbook. Okay, and some people have printed this one out. Of course, you have access to it digitally as well. But this goes through all the stages that we've been working through together. And has all the parts. And of course, some people just want to work on it digitally. So of course, you can keep that as a digital document or print that out later for yourself, or right now if that's a thing you're able to do. But remembering that you have access to that document on that web resource. And that web resource holds the playbook that has these 4 stages. Okay, so we went through stage 1 together, which was all about how to think about your goals for professional learning and possible barriers that you'll have. And we talked about different goal setting strategies and what does UDL say about goals. And then stage 2 was all about the when and how, right? And we're actually finishing that stage up tonight. The when can you give PD, and the how behind that PD structure. So we'll be working on that one. And then tonight, again, we're also going to get a chance to start stage 3, which is the content and sequence part. And this one does take a couple of sessions. I kind of stretch this one out a bit because there are so many resources in there. Okay, so we do have that piece in there. So just kind of reminding you of the different stages. I had a couple of responses that people were they got a little confused on the steps that were in there. I also want to remind you there's a new resource on the website now, because there was a request on just more explanation on how the stages are put together and how they kind of flow together. There's actually a video link right here that goes through an overview of the different stages. So that might be something you want to look at tonight during work time, or you might want to look at that later. But I did want to put that together for a couple of the responses that came up of just trying to clarify some of the stages. Okay, so if that's a support that you want to check out, it's right there on the top of that website under that session 1 part. Okay, so those are some of the outcome pieces. And then I want to do a quick norms reminder with you that we did this activity and talked about collaboration norms. And so we're going to get a link in there around the norms. This is linked to, thanks so much, Adam. Um, and we spent a little bit of time talking about things that we like to see when we collaborate and things that we don't want to see when we collaborate. And this is also another powerful thing to do with your adult learners is have them think about just how those norms support them. And I know I've been in sessions where people will say, norms again, but it can be it is a really powerful piece to consider. Just like with your student learners and coming up with expectations of how you're going to work together, it's great to do that um, with your adult learners too. Right. So I just want to remind you of a couple of things that we had in here, and you can take a look at that link. You can also use this Google Drawing um, and just make a copy of it and use that if you want to use that as a template for yourself. But just a quick reminder of the things that we agreed together. We said flexibility and resources at different levels. So take a second to look at this. And in chat, let me know if there's anything that we need to add, or you can give me a thumbs up in chat that these norms still look fine for you. We had people say, please make sure there's an agenda. Gosh, it's tough for me when there's not an agenda or goals for our sessions, or I'm not able to get to resources. So just take a quick look at those norms. Is there anything that we need to add? And if you want to add something, you can either put it in the doc itself because you have editing privileges to this, or you can let us know in chat. All right, I'm not seeing any additions. If you want to unmute, if you want to put your camera on and give me a thumbs up or anything too, that's fine. But it looks like we can move forward with the norms that we have. I want to jump to our next part here. I did a resource reminder showing you the website, remember? So we have the digital, I just showed it to you a little bit early, making sure that some of the people that were new, they could get to those pieces quickly. But knowing that there are digital resources here, also want to show you on our web resource. It's organized by session. So here, of course, is session 1. So you can go back and look at any of those resources that were shared. There, of course, is the playbook that I shared with you. During session 2, we had a new slideshow, and we actually looked at some of the resources for goals and barriers, and then that when and how. And this one highlights some of the main barriers, some of the main resources that are here. And so here are some of the ones that we're going to be looking at again tonight. The coaching, the FAQ that we had with the frequently asked questions around UDL, we're going to be looking at this one again at the end of the session. Got a lot of feedback on that one that people were really appreciative of the feedback piece with the different questions answered. So we'll look at that one again. And then here's our stage 3 resources where I have our slideshow from tonight. And then here are the big resources that we're going to be looking at and exploring some of that work time during stage 2. Okay, so we'll be digging back into that in a moment, but I want to make sure you have that web resource. All right, perfect. So tonight we are jumping back into stage 2, and this is really around the when can you provide PD? I know that can be a real struggle for some districts, actually most districts. And then that how of putting PD together. And of course, these pieces are really following along with the UDL framework, so you will hopefully see a lot of reference to UDL strategies as we go. Okay. Within that stage, and let me jump back in real quick, within this stage 2 and within every stage, remember that we go through these different steps. So last time we talked about goals within that step, right? We talked about our prior knowledge activity. And now tonight, we're really going to dig into the new learning and the resources that go along with that stage, the stage of when and how. Okay, so that's what we're going to focus on in just a few minutes. And it also has 3 different steps that we'll have a chance to kind of look at. Is we're going to spend most of our time looking at those resources. Okay. And you'll have a chance to do that in a couple different ways. You can make a choice on that. And then have a chance to start thinking about your next steps of your planning and then any reflection that you want to gather as you look at those resources. Okay. All right. Now we're also tonight going to be jumping to stage 3, and we're going to start looking at content and sequence that go along with UDL professional learning. And in that one, we're just going to get to thinking about some of the goals that go along with that, and a prior knowledge activity. So those are some of the pieces that we're going to be exploring during our session. Okay, so now we're going to jump in. Oh, everybody wake up. Um, Now we're going to jump into the when and how stage 2, and you're going to get choice now. All right. In your playbook, whether you're looking at it digitally or you have your paper copy with you, you're going to see that we have page 12 is where those resources are located, and you'll see there are links to those resources there. And the resources, of course, are also on the website. Let me bring that back over here. And this is stage 2. You can see those links to those resources here, so you can get to those digital resources, giving you a couple different ways to get to those. Okay. And your choices are you can spend 15 minutes by yourself, just you can mute the sound because I'm gonna be sharing and talking to the other group, but you can work on your own. You can mute and just explore, kind of watch. I'll be kind of waving as we get our timer. I know the timer kind of turns off as I jump to other pages, so it's hard to keep the timer up on the screen. But we'll take about 15 minutes. So you might want to set a timer for yourself if you're going to work on your own. And just look through pages 12 to 17, check out those resources, see what's in there, and then be ready to share out either in chat or unmuting yourself, which we love. We have a lot of people that do some great sharing, so that we can hear what did you find, what's your own personal experience around this topic of when and how to provide PD, and so that we can share with everyone else. Your other choice is to keep your speaker on, keep your sound on, and we're just going to work as a group, and I'm going to share out the resources with you. I'm going to ask for some discussion pieces. No problem, Joan. So those are your two pieces, but we're going to spend a good 15 minutes on having you dig into these resources, because these are some of those pretty meaty parts that I want to get you a chance to look at. And of course, looking at later on your own, but I want you to get you a chance to look at these with us. Okay, so decide what you're going to do. All right. And I'm going to set another timer here for myself, because I know this timer, when I start jumping to the resources to share with you, will just be gone from the screen. So I'm going to start my timer. So again, post that link to materials. Can we get that website link up there again for us, Adam? And let me see, I'm going to try to pull it on there too. Even with my screens, it's hard for me to grab. There's that material, there's that website resource. Perfect. All right. So go ahead, you're setting your timer and muting the sound so it's not bothering you. And anyone else that's staying, we're going to go through these resources together. Perfect. So I'm going to bring the website over here. I have my timer set. Perfect. So right here, and I'll make this one larger for us. These are the resources that are pulled right from page number 12. So if you look at page number 12, it really walks through how we can really orchestrate when and how we can provide learning sessions for our staff. And there are 4 resources that I really want to pull you towards. Okay, and I would really love to hear from you guys as well, because the first one is all about finding time. So, and this is what I hear from a ton of districts, ours is, and all of our admin, it's almost impossible to find time to give anyone professional learning, right? I'm going to go ahead and open up this resource while we're talking. It is really tough, but the more you dig and think about the times that you already have kind of built in, it's finding ways to lean on all those times that you have. A lot of districts have early release days. A lot of districts have PLC or different in-service days. And there's a lot of times when you're just doing different little sessions with your teachers on different things. And we talked about this last time. Every opportunity you have to be in front of your teachers is an opportunity for you to model UDL, right? And then there's also times where, of course, you want to go through more formal UDL training itself. So this is a piece where if it's you by yourself orchestrating, it might be just you doing a brainstorming session, but it could be you, hopefully, with a team of a few people, really sitting and brainstorming about the time that you already have access to, and maybe being really creative about the time that you already have. Um, Anyone want to speak up about, like, do you have time already set? Do you have days that you have access to teachers? I know it's getting harder and harder with different budget cuts and things like that. But are people able to find some time that's actually there? Okay, we use PLT time to help out with UDL. Excellent. What are some other ways that people have found time? Right? Because you can find structures already in place, find your team, find your partners in this work. It might be some fact gathering that you need to do if you're actually new in this position. I know there's a couple people that are pretty new in their coaching. It might be that you have to go and just do some digging to find out what you have access to as far as time. And then learning, of course, learning about your staff members that you have to support, right? Just like we would find time to actually learn about our students, we would want to learn about our staff. What do they care about? Why did they get into education? How do they like to learn? A lot of those surveys can help with that, right? And then getting really creative with your time. It could be that you are finding small chunks of time within staff meetings, right? If you have structured time with early releases, finding one of those early releases a month or something that can start to be woven into those opportunities to work with staff. And then there are always people that want to do a little bit extra, right? Can you provide things like book study options for people? Does it always have to be face to face? I know that's always better, but you can provide some options for people to just have access to resources or different website things. I do have some books listed of some great book studies that I know a lot of our teachers and other districts have been using. Unlearning is a great first book. If you guys haven't read that one or have just some reservations on, gosh, how do we even get people to even consider starting? Unlearning, Allison Posey is a real great, short, non-threatening read for that. The Design and Deliver by Louis Lord Nelson, it's a little meatier, but it definitely is a great, really dig into the details around UDL and all the principles and giving people some real background pieces. And this one's fairly new, but this shift to student-led, this new one by Novak, this is a nice one that really has very explicit strategies. And we've had a lot of our middle and upper, our high school teachers find this one really accessible, having real practical things you can try out with your students that make a lot of sense, that shift that time away from the teacher on moving that onto the students. So there's some really great pieces in there. And then, like we've said before, finding ways for every meeting and session you have with teachers to be an opportunity to model UDL. Um, Perfect seeing in other chat surveys for sure, early release time, perhaps after school. Yep, book clubs with food and drink. Yes, we talked about that before, that snacks and food and drink can be that way to bring people in. We also do the raffles, right? The silly prizes just to get people engaged and just kind of in that mode. But we talked about ways to just make sure every meeting has those UDL strategies of the goals are there, the feedback is there, the different entry points for your different learners is there, right? Finding those strategies to put into every session. And then finding those people that are really wanting to go ahead, like if you have your book study group, having those people, having opportunities for them to really dig in and start to kind of just really experience and share with their peers can be something that just lifts up people around them. We've created a few online courses. We use Google Classroom. I know some people use Canvas or other LMS learning management systems, but you can create classes that are like on demand classes for teachers. People are always trying to get clock hours. You can make these, of course, equity-based clock hours. So there are ways to have other opportunities for teachers to learn at their own pace or kind of push things for themselves. Um, and then sometimes we'll have, I run our tech department as well. So we'll have like our weekly Tech Tuesday tech tips, right, that we share with everyone. Well, we make sure those are actually UDL, right? So it's not just, hey, we have Google Read Write or whatever the digital tool is. It's, hey, here's how you can promote engagement using digital tools, right? So having those different things that you share always have that spin of, hey, we picked this because it's an inclusionary practice support. And so we're going to lead with that and have that be the piece that really pushes how that can support their goals with students. Not that we would just want them to use Google Slides, right, or Pear Deck or whatever digital tool you've purchased for your district, but there should be a really great inclusionary reason why those tools are out there. There's the lunch and learn strategy, and we've had teachers chat. Go in and visit during different teachers' lunch breaks and go in and chat. I've seen some great interactive bulletin board ideas in staff rooms that share ideas and QR codes to different links to resources for people. I've seen principals that will share out, like in their meetings, their notes to staff, they'll actually share a great strategy, a UDL strategy right in their flyers to staff. So just different ways you can highlight those. And then we already talked about this one with just incentives for attending sessions and feeling that really positive piece of prize drawings, of course, clock hours, fun certificates or snacks, right? And like I keep saying, and I just can't say this one enough, is really using those feedback loops for every single one of your trainings, right? What worked for you with this training? What would you hope we would change with this training? Really reminding staff that that training is for them. And the team that I do PD with, I know they were really nervous at first to do those feedback pieces of, oh, we're not going to get great feedback and it's hard to hear from your peers on how you're doing. Um, but it was really interesting how after a few cycles of feedback, people really shared that it became more about just the design and not that it was like any personal things, right? And it also is, you want to be careful with how you're crafting your questions too. But it was really nice to see how great that feedback really supports the learner and supports that design, because it can be really nerve-wracking to be that person up in front of your peers sharing that stuff. That, right, that's hard to do. It really is hard to do. So really using that feedback as a way for it not to be about you as the presenter, but about the session and how people can help you. Anything that people want to add on the finding time? I know that can be really hard in some cases. Another big lesson that I learned the hard way is as we started sharing out resources in our first year of trying to do training, and this is, of course, district-wide training in different pockets, but we just had all these resources out there, right? We had a video that we shared or these different articles, and we first started with we're a Google district, so we first started with just some shared folders, and I bet you can guess what happened. People couldn't find their folders. It just became a mess. So one of the pieces that we realized is we really needed to create a resource bank, right? We needed to keep a home for all the things that we were putting together for our teachers. So this next link on here just goes to an idea of what is a resource bank and why do you need one. And what I want to do is just, you can come back and look at this one yourself, but what we did is we just built, because we're at Google, we built a Google site, and this houses all of our resources for our whole district. So all of our different teams at our different buildings will use this during their trainings. They'll send me things so that I can add more pieces to our resource bank. But if you look over here, what we started with was just the homepage just talks about what is UDL. There's a really great resource here on the ultimate guide to UDL. It's a great one that Novak posted. But we have a homepage that kind of gives you some background on what UDL is. And then this kind of flows with how our training actually goes. We actually start with the foundational beliefs behind UDL. And we have a page for each one of the foundational beliefs. So in the first year of training, our buildings would go through and learn, and this was like year one, was just foundational beliefs. And they would go through and learn about what is learner variability, right? Because these are those three big foundational pieces behind UDL. And if you can have your whole staff get around these three ideas, it gives reason behind why UDL and inclusionary practice is so important, right? So we would have our favorite infographics that we liked. There were some videos that we used for learner variability. And so we had access for staff in different ways to access these resources. And sometimes we had like a station activity and they'd have to go pick two and then share them. But we would hold all of our favorite resources just on a website. So coming up with a plan of where are you going to put your resources? Right? How are you going to find ways for teachers to be able to share things with the team that actually posts those? But this is 4 years in now with our resource page that we keep changing and adding to. But we really found this was the only way, right? We just had to create a website of putting all these things together. And then, of course, right when the UDL changed all their wording over the summer, we got to go back in and add new resources and change them, which was great. I mean, you want to go in and make sure your things are fresh anyway. But just giving you an idea of how putting together a resource page can kind of help you. And then this also translated into we had teachers create resource pages for their classrooms, right? If I'm going to have different resources for my students and I'm a social studies teacher, gosh, I should have videos, I should have images, I should have articles, and I can put those on a web resource or put them in my Google Classroom, of course, but have multiple resources for students to choose from and access to do their learning. So we tried to make sure there was carryover of, hey, we're not just doing this for adult learners, this is for all learners, is finding a way to capture and hold all the resources together and making sure there was a great variety of resources. So after we went through all those foundational beliefs, we went through the three, of course, main principles of UDL. And one thing I want to show you really quickly is, and if you might notice that our professional coaching, our page is just one of the pages on this whole website. So you already have access to this whole thing. You can go back and look at any of these. And so these are just different book studies and trainings that are on the bottom. But for example, really quickly to make this something that the staff actually participated in with engagement, we would go through what is engagement. We had the different resources people really liked with engagement and some videos and things. But down here was a section where these are their resources now. These are pieces where they were submitting samples of forms that they would use for feedback or different articles or different things from their classroom that they would use. So there's this whole shared folder that would go for every single one of the principles that we would just slowly build more and more resources in. So the idea of having a shared site for all those pieces. All right. Our 15 minutes is up. I see someone's unmuted. Go ahead.
I just was thinking about this and I shared it in the chat, but I wanted to also verbalize it. One of the things I find frustrating about the training that we've done in our district is they introduce all these fabulous resources, 6 of them in an hour and a half training, and they gave us maybe 30 seconds to play with each new resource. They're not useful if you don't get the time to go in. And this year, our district is piloting DIFIT. It's an AI form,
Oh,
and
yeah, yeah.
it's fantastic. But we need time to learn how to use it. Every time you introduce a new resource, we need to know how to use it. We need to, poke around. And I'm good at experimenting, but a lot of staff is not good at experimenting, and they need push this button, push this button, push this button, and we're not giving that time with UDL. Sorry about the background dogs.
No, you're all good. You're all good. And that's a big piece. You have to make sure these are ongoing sessions, right? If you've introduced a tool, maybe you have an introduction time, but you keep bringing that tool up. So for example, one of our big tools that we love is Pear Deck, right? So we actually use Pear Deck within our slides for our staff and we show it in use and they keep seeing it, they keep seeing it. And then we give them a session on how do they build their own Pear Deck and why would you use Pear Deck for engagement and things like that. But you're totally right. If it's a one and done session, that's not helpful for anybody, right? Especially if it's a tech tool that has a bunch of steps. So how in your PD are you going to bring up maybe a few strategies or a few tools, but keep repeating them, right? How are you going to do that for your staff? So as you're constructing your web resource or whatever it is that you're making, right, make sure that there is ongoing support for those pieces. So for example, for engagement for us, we have a page here that shows like the different for example, tech tools that we have for engagement, but people have to be able to get back to those things. They have to be something that's reoccurring, right? Our feedback strategies, here's Pear Deck over and over again. And less is more when you're actually getting into the strategies that you're sharing, and repetition is important. So, for example, in our district for engagement, we picked it's feedback and goals. Those are the big things we're focusing on engagement. There's a million ways to do that, but we're focusing on feedback and goals, right? But you're right, Tonya, if you're going to show a thing for 5 minutes, right? You're going to have more frustration than anything else. That's an important thing for you to remember with your crew,
I
right? You
really
can't
like your
do that.
idea of one or two. That is not what we've been doing in our district. And
Ugh.
it's just so frustrating. And then myself as a sped teacher trying to support staff, find the staff using their curriculum from 15 years ago because they know how to use that. And it's so dry and it's so old school. And there's so many good things, but we're not giving them, they don't feel safe using it because 5 minutes of here's diff it, try it.
Oh.
Here's this, try it. It's definitely frustrating.
Yeah, if they're not coming back on that over and over again, I totally understand. Yeah, it can't be a quick, oh, and let's move on to the next thing. So yeah, that's a powerful lesson for you to remember as you're supporting staff, as you're thinking about how you're supporting your own learning, is we can't put too much on our plates. Absolutely. I want to show you this last resource really quickly, and this one is about selecting routines. And I really like this one because as we put our sessions together, this is where we really tried to focus on um, thinking about how we were already doing our professional learning, right? Did we have our goals set? Thinking about what routines we wanted to keep sharing with everyone during our sessions. What did we want to really model? So we created an agenda template for all of our sessions, and it's here if you want to see it. Um, we would block out our time on our sessions, right? But then we tried to make sure that we had starting with certain strategies, and we used them every single time. So every single time we had a goal slide. What was our goal for the session? Was everybody clear about the goal? Our feedback had a question: did we meet our goal? We had table tents on the table that had, here's what our goal is for our session. So there were many ways for them to access the goal. We talked about how important it is to have every learning opportunity have a firm but flexible goal. And so modeling that was key for us for our adult learners. And then reminding them, hey, it's the same for your students. You have to have clarity around what the learning is. We're going to show you all these different ways. We have it on our website. We have it on the top of your graphic organizer. The goal is there. It's everywhere. We also gave them chances to develop their own personal goals within our sessions. So that was one that we modeled every single time in our sessions. And then feedback loops. That was another one we modeled every single time. There was always an opportunity for them to give feedback at the end of the session, and then the next session would start with what they shared with us. So those were super important. And of course, there are different ways to gather feedback, not always using a Google form, right? We had little paper ones. Remember the exit slips, things like that. There's lots of ways to gather feedback, but we made sure the biggest piece that you have to do is talk about the feedback the very next session. Here's what you shared. Hey, we only had 60% of our group say we met our goal. Let's untangle that, right? You're right. Oh, we ran out of time. That's what happened. We're going to make sure we think about our time better or whatever it is. But you're being super intentional with, hey, here's what you told us, and here's what we're going to do next. And then really talking about how you should be doing that with your learners in class, right? How can you do those same feedback loop pieces? And then we had other strategies that we highlighted, just not as much, right? We talked about, gosh, can we make sure we have prior knowledge ties that we model within our sessions? Can we make sure we have choices for people and entry points? Can we make sure it's learner centered, right? Can we make sure there's always time for reflection and planning? So within our sessions, we were really careful to make sure that our PD had really specific strategies and we called them out, right? We even did a step aside of, hey, did you see how we actually shared goals with you? What are a couple ways we shared goals with you, right? And you could do that with your student learners too, but it was super powerful to do with our adults. Oh, we had the strategies digital and we had it in paper for you, right? Or the goals out for you, right? How did we gather feedback this time? What did we do with the feedback? How did that support you as a learner, right? Being really intentional where they were seeing which strategies in UDL we were addressing. And then we would also go back and have them actually look at the UDL guidelines and say, can you see where would that strategy actually support or eliminate barriers if we were going to go back and look at the guidelines? And a lot of times you'll see, oh, it's here, here, and here, right? You would see it in different spaces. And sometimes they'd see barriers that, of course, we hadn't even, things that the barriers were addressed in ways that we might not even have considered, but super powerful in that one. So just making sure you really think about what are those strategies. And like you said, Tonya, let's find ones that let's just pick a couple and make sure those are our highlight ones. And we can show you different ways to do it, but we're going to just really focus in on just a couple of those strategies we found are some really high leverage ones, right? Perfect. All right. Anything else people want to bring up about the when and the how with those resources or with other ones that you have? There's any thoughts that are bubbling up for you?
May I just ask a quick question?
Please, Julie.
So, thank you also, by the way. I'm sorry I was so late.
Oh, you're fine. You're fine.
I love your site that you've developed. That's amazing, really, truly amazing. And I was just wondering, it's super cool that you have staff contribute, and I understand that took some time, and you did it over time. How much did you, for lack of a better word, like how much were you content police? Like how much, like, and how did you handle that? Like not to be, something that you're like, wow, that might work for you, but I'm not sure I really want to put this on, or like how did you kind of handle that situation?
That is such a great question. So I'm glad you asked that. So I have my Tiger Access team, right, that helps me look at those different resources. So we don't really vet them, but kind of. And the thing that was nice is we never found anything that was unpostable, right? But we did go back with, hey, I wonder why. And we had a couple of people change a couple of things just based on it didn't make sense for me because maybe I wasn't in that context, right? But that is such a great question. And it was also really important for us that we wanted to post anything that people would share. But then you're right, it came up with, but what if it's not even close? Right. So what was really nice is we didn't find anything like that that wasn't like, oh my gosh, this totally goes against. But there were a couple where we really did question, I don't know how this fits in, or what was the point of this piece? But with a couple of questions, it was like, oh, I just use this for this. Oh, it okay, totally makes sense, right? So it was more of a, can you give me a little more context around this one? But you are so right that it's hard for a lot of people to even share anything. So when we started getting some things in, it was just like, oh my gosh, we're going to post them and highlight them in any way that we can. But luckily, we didn't find anything that was like, oh, this is just counter, right? This isn't even close to what we would use with UDL. But what was also fun is that as we had people post things, there was like after a few months, it was like, oh my gosh, can you post my new one? Because I found that this didn't work the way I wanted it to, or I tried this instead. And it really is from it, it's it really is from a team. I love that it's just like, hey, we're just going to try this, right? But that is such a great question. That is such a great question. And trying to put a lot of stuff up there where we would try to do co-planning sessions where they were built together. So it wasn't like one person was, right? Or I would have somebody describe something to me that they were doing, and then I created the template for it. Right. And they're like, oh my gosh. Right. So it was kind of nice where they felt like they were still getting to share, but then someone had helped them kind of design or put it in a way that made sense. So, but that's a really great question. Really great question. But yeah, the big thing is giving yourself some time for that to slowly happen, because it doesn't happen right away. Teachers are often super humble, and they'll often say things like, "Oh, I'm sure everybody does this, right? I'm not going to share that. Everybody does that." So it happened a lot when we were kind of like just sharing with people, "Oh my gosh, you have to share that." Right? Of prompting them to do stuff was the biggest way we would get people to put things in there. All right. Anything else on that one? I know there's a bunch of stuff in there, and I hope you have time to go back in and dig and look at those, especially the routines, this last one on routines. And creating that agenda template was so nice for us because we actually give PD at least once a month, right? And so it became overwhelming for us at first to just be ready for another session. So when we created an agenda template of, okay, we always do our goals, so that piece is ready. Oh, we always have a prior knowledge question, right? So we realized after a few sessions that a lot of pieces were pretty easy to do. And so and then we shared that with our staff of, hey, I know it might feel like a lot to build a lesson like this at first, but notice how many routines you're going to keep repeating, right? And that comfort level and that helping students feel engaged with that comfort of that sequence of how you would teach really is helpful. So finding those nice flows of how those routines can happen in your agenda just made it so much easier for everybody to actually um, create those pieces. All right. Thank you so much for joining. I know that went longer than 15 minutes. I'm so sorry about that, but I wanted to make sure we shared those pieces. All right. I'm going to get back to my slideshow here. I always get so many tabs open. It's just so crazy. Let me close some of these and get these out of the way. And again, hopefully you'll dig through and look at some of those resources as you have more time. Haha, as we never have time to do anything. But hopefully that will be a great resource for you to keep digging into. And my slides are over here. All right. Is there anything more? You guys have some great pieces. I know it's not a great time to ask people to share, but anything else about when and how of PD, a barrier that you're having, something, a success that you want to share? Anything on that one before we move on?
I was just thinking about the when you share
Mm-hmm.
it, and it occurred to me that one resource that we're seriously underusing in our district is our we like to use a Google chat where we're problem solving with
Mm-hmm.
students, or hey, have you seen so and so's Chromebook, that kind of thing. I think it would be a good place to drop in, have you tried this,
Oh,
and then just drop it as a, this is here for when you want it. You wouldn't want to do it too often because it would get overwhelming, but even once a week or once a month, have you tried this, would be a good way to introduce a new idea.
no, that is great. Yeah, almost like a weekly, hey, what do you think? And then asking people to share if they did, right? That would be really cool. I love that. Anything more? I love to pester staff and ask them, what's one thing that you really feel is working in your room? And then what's another thing that keeps you up at night, right? And so it's once they start sharing like some successes, it's amazing how much it like boosts them, right? Sometimes we would look like if we're just looking at engagement and have go through and say, just highlight the ones you feel like you got those ones. And what are you doing? Right. And so it's so nice to have people really think about the things they're already doing in their room. Or if they did that one little extra thing, like we had teachers that were doing some feedback, but they weren't ever coming back and saying anything about it. Right. So it was adding that next layer to a thing they were already spending time on, but they weren't really finding a lot of benefit from it because there was one little piece, right, that need to be added. And that thing that keeps you up at night or that barrier that you have, it's powerful when you unpack that and actually find that barrier on the UDL framework. And there are so many resources with, oh my gosh, if I just try this, or if I try this little thing, right? I love trying to think of um, addressing those barriers and knowing that if you're having that barrier pride, there's a lot of other people, right? They're having that same thing. And how can we really think about those barriers together, right? No, that's perfect. All right. So the next piece, and of course, you still have all those resources to dig back into the when and the how. And I know there's a lot of pieces that you can unravel and unpack around that. But I do want us to take a few minutes to come in and just start looking at stage 3. And like I said, we're just going to start this one, but this one is all about the possible content and the sequence behind um, actually sharing UDL, sharing inclusionary practice with your staff. And this one, of course, if you're in our book, of course, and there are some pages where if you want to go back and with the when and how, there's spaces where you can come up with your own ideas. You can do some reflection and do some planning for yourself, do some what's next for stage 2. But stage 3 starts on page 18 if you're in that book piece. And the first thing we look at with all the stages is to think about what our goals and our possible barriers could be with those with that actual step. And there's also this one to me is one of the most important prior knowledge activities. So I might have you spend a little bit more time on that one, but of course we always want to make sure we're considering goals and barriers. But if we look at the goals for this stage in content and sequence, and I'm sorry, it says stage 2 up here, it should stay stage 3. Um, it's really thinking about reviewing and selecting your content and being really careful about that. If you look on page 18, it does go through in the playbook. I'm sorry, I'm opening us up over on another screen so I can bring this page up for you too. I do like the way this one is worded over here. So if we're really talking about that stage 3, we're reviewing and selecting that content we want to share around UDL, right? And we know, just like learning with our students, sequence and entry points are hugely important, right? Um, it can make or break a lesson, right? When you're doing things with students, it's exactly the same with your adult learners. Um, and we want to be really careful with that and using that feedback to kind of check and do those dipstick checks with people as we're trying that. And then we talked about those powerful instructional routines. This one comes up again, really thinking about, as we think about our content and our sequence, which routines are we going to highlight in our sessions? Which ones are we going to use as high leverage moves that we're going to intentionally call out and make sure we share with our staff? And then of course always thinking about possible barriers that can come up. So hopefully as you're looking at this, and we talked about this a couple times, you're really seeing how crafting these lessons for your adult learners is exactly like using UDL to craft lessons for your students, right? A learner really is a learner when we come down to the research piece of it. It really is, and what we do for them. Okay, and it's those entry points and accommodating all of our learners, because just like in your classroom, your teachers are at way different spaces with their understanding around UDL, right? And also their comfort level. And just remembering that, just like our students, we have to be conscious of those needs of the variability of our learners. Okay. And the next thing, so you're kind of thinking about those pieces, but what I want you to do now, and I'm actually going to give you a few minutes to think about this, is prior knowledge activity. I want you to, and this is on, if you're in our playbook, this is on page 19. There's actually a section where you can actually write this down, but I want you to take a moment, and you're actually going to get about 10 minutes, but you're going to get to go back and look at your goals and the prior knowledge activity. But this one is to think back on your own journey with UDL. And I want you to think about your first early learning with this. Okay. And at some point, as you were learning, and you might have been like sold, drunk the Kool-Aid right away, right? But there was probably at some point that something convinced you this was worth the work, right? At some point, there was something you read or something you saw, or maybe it was even an experience you had with students. There was something that made UDL a thing you knew you had to spend your time on. And what was that? I want you to take a moment to reflect. So I'm going to give you about, and I'll watch the time. I'm going to start a timer at 10 minutes, and I'll probably check in with you a little bit before that. But I want you to go back and look at the goals and make sure you look at that prior knowledge activity and make some notes, because we're going to talk about it I want to really hear some of the pieces because this is that powerful why piece. And as you share this with others and share UDL and inclusion, that prior knowledge of what resonated and made this a pivotal thing for you is so important to remember, right? So I'm going to go ahead and set our timer, but I want you to take a moment. You're checking out page 18 and 19 and making notes, and we are going to share definitely about your prior knowledge question response. All right, go ahead and jump in on that. All right, great. Let's jump in and have people share some pieces from you can of course share about what you think about the goals or your personal goals or prior knowledge or ideas around that prior knowledge question. All right, Michelle S., would you like to share with us?
Sure thing. I'm just going to
Perfect.
read what I wrote.
Brilliant.
Okay, so when I noticed that some students, it was a novel study, I should say that. And what I noticed is that some students wanted paper packets versus our digital OneNote that we had for this novel study. And it got me thinking about how we all process differently and how some may prefer or require typed responses versus handwritten responses. And it also convinced me that there are different ways to meet literacy goals, such as recorded responses, and then writing goals as well, such as talk to text. So for me, it was a process of getting there. It was little bit by little bit, and kind of breaking away from my deep rooted thinking of there's only one way to do this, for my ease and comfort as a teacher, and letting go of that control. Um,
That's good.
I also see in myself that I like printed books versus digital books, and I like packets, right? But in this packet, I prefer to type it rather than handwrite it, because handwriting is difficult for me. So when I started to see how my students' production improved both in quality and in quantity. In quantity, I
Mhm.
mean the amount of evidence that I would have to be able to assess that standard. It helps to motivate me to offer choices and build UDL principles into my practice.
I've heard that one so many times that from our middle school and high school, they've shared, "Hey, as soon as I started to see the student evidence, when I gave them a couple of choices, okay, I'm sold," right? And did you feel like it was so much more work on your part ongoing to make those choices happen?
No, not really. I mean, like I said, it was a process. So it wasn't just a dump of, okay, these are all the different choices and all the variability that I can do. It was just something that I added on as we went. And then it's just
Exactly.
something that I tap back into as I reteach the unit. Or it's just becomes second nature as I'm designing future learning opportunities. So it's not too challenging.
I love that you say it becomes second nature because now it's not like you're making up a new choice. It's how am I using that same strategy of choice with just this new content, right? No, that's perfect. Because that's a huge misconception that teachers first starting down this road will say, "Oh my gosh, it's all about choices and I just don't have time to make all these things," right? But it's not really that, right? Like you said, hey, it's just paper and it's just this. And it's amazing how just doing that can change production levels because students get to pick which one, right? It's not that they're not going to do it, but I'm giving you a chance to do it this way or this way. And now I have more ownership. I feel like I have more of myself that I can put into this. No, that's super powerful. And I love the process piece, right? It's like, because there's probably things you started that you don't still do because you didn't either see, right? It's that, oh, I'm going to keep using this because this worked, right? No, that's perfect. Thank you so much for sharing. Julie?
So like Michelle, it for me, there's been a lot of little aha moments that really have just hit me over time that kind of just eventually culminated, but definitely as a classroom teacher, knowing that when I was following kind of that one size fits all approach, just watching that we were leaving kids behind. And I think that troubles so many educators. When we notice that, and then that UDL provides a way to not do that. And that feels really good. And so, I was kind of sold once I understood what that was all about. And this sounds kind of silly, but it did come to mind. You know how much I love the Shelley Moore Napoleon Schmopoleon video? But I can't tell you how important I think that is. And like, I just think the way she explains it, the difference between forward design and backward design, and so many times I'm in I'm a TOSA at this time, and just having those conversations about like, now, why are we doing this, or what are we doing, and getting caught on, well, this is just the activity that we do because we've done it, or and not really getting to the why. And so I think that was a real pivotal, like, I just love that one. I watched it a bunch of times because she just explains that um so well. So um just trying to find ways to bring that into the conversations that we're having now. Like, just, well, let's talk that through. What really is the goal for this chunk of time? And do we really have to all show what we know or learn in the same way? Because I think most people would agree that's not true. I think they would be like, of course, we don't all learn the same way, or need the same things in the same moment. So I think just getting people on board is kind of one of my goals for right now. Just in little, we're not at a spot in our district where we're really going big picture, but one conversation at a time. Michelle and I are trying to sneak it in where we can, I would
But
say.
that's so
Oh yeah,
powerful too, right?
I'll put it in the chat, because I did actually just look it up during our 10 minutes. Because
Oh,
if
the
you
video,
haven't seen
yes.
it, it is so awesome.
And her website, she has just some great, just her energy, right? And the things that she shares, amazing. Yeah, put that in there so I can add the link to our web resource too. That is a good, yeah, that's a good, she's got some great stuff. But even, I mean, even if your district is not, if you're not doing this at a district-wide level, it's those little pieces and that little grassroots effort, right? As people start doing this and start talking to each other, it's amazing how that can be such a powerful way for this to happen, right? Megan, would you like to share with us tonight?
Sure, I can share. I was just reflecting on personal goal is one of my personal goals is in an assistive technology TOSA position, trying to help bridge that gap of UDL for students who might have like a communication device in their general ed classroom. So trying to just get the buy-in from all the staff members to make sure that they feel empowered to use the devices and that they feel comfortable using them. And so it's just been a little bit of some reflection on some things that I could maybe do a little differently, or things that have gone well this year in some small cases.
And what are you finding, like when you're having students use or talking about using devices, what are some of those things you found that are really working? Does my question make sense?
Yeah, some things that have been going well is just I've been trying to set it up kind of like coaching cycles. So like what is something that you guys as a team or as adults want to like focus on or work on that you're having a hard time with, to make it more specific to each individual person, not the child. And just reiterating, like this child is learning how to use their device, just like you're learning how to use the device. So trying to pair it more towards like what supports might the adults need and trying to have them come up with kind of specific goals of what they want to work on with that. Some things that I've kind of ran into is I think it might be a little bit overwhelming at times for some people to come up with that goal because they're not sure where to start. So trying to be a little
Yes.
bit more guiding and like, here are some ways that like ideas that I would love for you to do this, be able to use this. Or you mentioned like this science lesson, like, let's come up with a goal that you will feel comfortable modeling these two core words that relate to the science lesson on there. Um, so that's been helpful. One of the hard part is I think we all probably feel this way coming into like the time piece of wanting to find time to like debrief or like have a pre-meeting of like reiterating like, okay, here's my support for you. Because sometimes I think people think like, oh, you're just going to come in and like work with the kid and like fix this thing or like have this magical wand. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to come and then I need to make sure that you feel comfortable doing this when I leave so that in 2 weeks, when I come back to your building, like we
You've been
have
doing
like this
something. Yep.
this is going well, this isn't going well, and we can have a little bit more collaboration on that.
Nice. And you're right, setting goals. A lot of times we'll just ask students, okay, set personal goals, right? And we did this with a lot of different skills, but we don't provide the background on how to do that. And setting goals, oh my gosh, and following through, all those pieces take so much support, right? And that scaffolding that students might need to make that happen. Oh, it's super powerful. Thank you so much, Megan. Joan, are you able to share with us tonight? I don't know if Joan's able to share. Tonya, how about you? Am I saying your name right?
It's Tanya,
Tanya. Okay, we have
but
someone
it's
in our
been said
staff
that
that
way
was,
before, so I don't even think about it.
I know we have a staff member that has exactly that same spelling, and her name is Tonya. So I'm so sorry, Tanya.
It's all good. I was thinking of you said prior knowledge, and I was thinking of when I really realized prior knowledge was important. And it's a long time ago. When I was 25, I was a nanny and I was tutoring in math. And it was the 90s, and we had this cheesy little math computer program where they were doing equations on a scale. And I looked at that scale and I had this epiphany that I had missed all the way through high school, that the equal sign in math was the most important thing about math. And I had never caught that because I had never seen a visual of an equation before. And that
Oh,
and that started me on a lifetime of using visuals versus other options, because I'm like, oh my gosh, the equal sign is important. That's why I couldn't do algebra, because I didn't understand this concept of a scale. And then I was thinking, I just finished writing an IEP last night, and I was checking in with my students' last year teacher, and she was talking about the fact how this student couldn't go anywhere without picking up a stick or a rock, which isn't an issue that we've had since early September. And I was thinking, what did I do differently that she didn't? And I remembered I talked to the speech therapist, and she told me that the student was really into visuals. And so I made picture rules for everything. Instead of saying, don't pick up things off the ground, I found a little cartoon character that was his skin color and showed a kid picking up a piece of something off the ground, and then put a great big slash saying no over it, like with a caution sign. And I printed it out in color and I showed it to the student. I said, what do you think this means? He says, don't pick things up off the ground. He told me right away. And
yep.
it is that behavior, and he threw things everywhere, is completely gone because I thought the way he learned.
See, and that
And
is, yeah, you just got cute. You got cues from him. Yep.
yes, yeah. And I didn't even, not once when I've done that, have I told him what the picture said. I looked at the picture and said, can you tell me what this picture means? And he knows, because
Yep.
that's the way he learns. And if we can reach people the way they learn, oh
Mhm.
my gosh, do we fly when we can reach them the way they learn.
Mhm. That is so powerful. That's why I love the learner surveys, and or it's like just sitting with the student and getting a chance to know them enough and chatting with them of what do you think supports you, right? I was
Yeah.
working with a high school group and we were doing some sessions together and we talked about, gosh, do you guys like background music? Do you like it to be quiet? Do you like to be able to visit with a peer while you're doing something, or do you not?
Yeah.
And it's not about what you like, right? What helps you learn better,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
I was thinking of one of the very first students I started working with as a para before I became a teacher. For months, the student told me I can't skip a question. And I heard it, but I didn't hear it.
Right. It's kind of
It
blew past you.
Yes, because I can't skip a question. Finally, one day, I stopped and I listened and I said, "What do you mean you can't skip a question?" And I realized he was still on the same question from that he'd been on for 2 days. And he literally physically meant he couldn't skip a question. And the reason
Oh,
he was needing para support, sorry
it's
about
okay.
that.
You got your little guard baby back behind you.
Yeah, is he couldn't skip a question. I said, so if you're at a question that you don't know what to do about, what should you do about it? Nobody had ever asked him that.
Isn't that amazing?
And he says, probably ask for help. I said, go ask the teacher for help. I didn't even make it. I wanted him to, he went and asked the teacher for the help. By the end of that year, he no longer needed a para ever because he learned he could say, I don't know how to do this.
Isn't that crazy having students think for a minute about what doesn't help them or what does help them and how they can articulate that and then realize
Yes,
so how much you
yes,
empowered him, right?
yes,
He was
yes.
just at a roadblock and couldn't. Yep.
Yeah, he had to do English twice. Had to do English 9 twice because he didn't do anything. And now he is a productive member of society working as a garbage man and doing a great thing because he learned,
See.
oh, I can ask a question. And
Yep.
students will tell you how they learn, what they need, but you have to listen. And
And
sometimes,
they'll tell you in different ways. They might not
yes,
say it, right? But they will be
yes.
very clear if we do listen. Yep, you are so right.
Like a little guy, I just had him for 1 year. And every time he walked over to read with me, oh, he was so dramatic. I hate reading. There's so many words on the page. Reading is awful. And I heard him say there's so many words on the page one day in his dramatic walk over to my desk to work with me. And I said, too many words on the page? I can fix that. And I put white paper over everything but one sentence.
Screen masking, yep.
Yeah. And he went up 2.5 grades in reading in 6 months, and he passed his 5th grade SPA last year
Oh my
because
gosh.
he could, and he told everybody that ever asked him to read, he told them what was wrong, but he wasn't saying it in the nicest voice, and so nobody
No.
heard it.
He wasn't saying it in a solution way, right?
No, no.
But he knew what he wanted. He knew what his barrier was.
Yes, he
There was just
was.
too much distracting him on that page. He
Yeah, yeah,
couldn't look at anything because there was too much to look at.
yeah, because it was everywhere.
It
So
was everything.
it was
Oh.
amazing. His mom was so excited when he passed the SPA because she knew how hard we had worked before that.
Oh, see, those are the kind of stories, right? When we open up with our peers and we talk about what it is that this kind of examination of students and learning and barriers, what it can do, right? Because it basically changed that kid's life, right? Completely. And the other student you talked about as well, right?
Yes,
Where,
100%.
yep,
And it was, and neither times was it because I was a brilliant teacher. It was because I finally heard the words that he was saying.
but in a way you were though, right? So don't discount that. It was but it's so hard to do that, right? In the
Yes.
midst of everything and all these students taking a breath and really listening or really watching is
Yeah.
super hard to do because you have your content and you have your lesson. And that's what I think is so powerful about UDL is if we stop ahead of time and say, gosh, what could be a barrier? What are some of my experiences with students? Oh my gosh, maybe I should have some screen masking tools, digital and not, and share with students how this could be helpful, right? It's like when we have Google Read Write or Read Write for Google, however you say it, right? We'll share that with every single student in the district and show them how to use it and say things like this is not a tool you might use all the time, but anyone could use it at any time, right? Just like manipulatives or any of those things, and having students know that they have options at any point and it's not like they're a crazy outlier kid because they're the only one that would use this. At any point, I could have just screen fatigue or just my eyes are tired. And screen masking is great. to use for any student, but for some students, it's like the make or break, right? So that's the thing that's so powerful for me is if we just share with students all the ways they could be supported and give them those options of here's what you could just use at any time, right? And look how powerful it is. It's just so empowering, right? So you having that chance of just, oh my gosh, he's actually not saying it in the most appropriate way, but he's telling me exactly what he needs, right? And learners will tell us exactly what they need. Like when you were telling us a story of, hey, they're just showing us this AI tool for 1 minute and this is not helping me at all. You were very much explaining what you needed. Unfortunately, not listened to, right? But showing somebody something for 5 minutes and saying, oh, go have fun with that is not a great learning experience for a lot of people. But we need to be ready to listen, right? Thank you so much for sharing that. That was perfect. Excellent. I think we got everybody. Joan, were you able to unmute yourself? I know there was something going on there. All right. Thank you so much for sharing. I think remembering that our prior knowledge experience, what brought us to wanting to spend time to learn about this and why it is so important to us is such an important thing to share, right? With our peers of why this is powerful. And I love the different stories that you had and remembering what it was that had you convinced or wanting to spend time to try something different is so powerful to share with others. All right. Boy, our time has just flown by. I do want to share with you our FAQ document again. Remember, this is on our website. And I do want to share. Oh, and I also put that the video on there, the Napoleon Schmolian. It's on there if you want to go on. It is a great video. I hadn't seen that one in a while. Thanks for the reminder on that one. But our FAQ document, I want to remind you about this one. This is based on a bunch of questions that have come from our staff and just different people that I've worked with. And I did get an email about a new one that was just added between our sessions. So I want to make sure I called it out. Okay, here it is right here. It's focusing on attendance. And this is adult learners and our students, right? So when we're focused on great professional learning for our staff, what can we do with spotty attendance? How can we address this as it can cause disjointed experiences for people that miss sessions? It can compromise the next session as you have people join in late or jump in, right? So what can we do about that? And that is such a great question. So I have added some pieces on here, and this has happened for us as well. We also have a high school that is focusing on attendance. It's a huge issue with our student learners. So just a couple of things on this one. It's a really powerful move to address this and share with your staff how you are addressing it because it will directly relate to what they could do in class. So one of the things we do is make sure we provide before and after sessions all the materials. We'll create a routine where they have access to the slideshows, just like on the site that I've shared with you. You can get back to the slideshows. If you go on here early, you'll see that I have things like for session 4 and 5, there's already resources there where you could go and look ahead of time and sharing with staff that those pieces are there, sharing with your students where they can get access to resources. That Google Classroom or however you post those things, make sure people have access to them, right? Make sure however your communication with it, if it's email or whatever it is, making sure people know the takeaways from that, what happened with the feedback, things like that. We also try to build in, of course, and this is one that all of you know, just building in reflection and review time activities for people, ways for them to share out with each other. What do they remember from previous sessions? Of course, sharing content in multiple ways, making sure that people have access to get to the content, of course, if it's in video or articles and things like that. And then here's one that our team came up with of creating a list of go-to people. So we have our team at the high school that is our PD team and it's about 13 different people and it's spread through departments so that people know, hey, this is my person in my department that I can go to and check in with if I have a question or I missed something or I need a resource. And I know teachers that actually do that in their classrooms. They have students in the classroom where they'll actually make sure resources are available, or they'll have some sort of buddy system set up in collaborative groups where they have students that are supporting each other. So hopefully some of those resources resonate with you and kind of make sense as you're trying to combat that, because it is a reality. Absolutely. People will miss it. It is just going to be the way things work. And of course, not intentionally, things always happen. But hopefully you'll see some resources that support you in there. Again, please make sure you go back to this FAQ. Send me more questions. I get those either on email from you, or of course you can put those in the feedback. But they're great questions. And if you have that question, it's going to be something that can support other people as well. So please, please give me those questions, give me those pieces that we can look at together. Excellent. All right. Oh my gosh, our time is up. Let me really quickly. Our next session is February 4th, 4 p.m. We're going to complete stage 3. We're going to look at a bunch of resources that really share sequence ideas. And of course, talk about that content and those different things that you can share during those sessions, and kind of how to weave those in if you're doing other kinds of PD. Of course, there's no homework, but it's just up to you to dig into those resources, either resources from previous stages, or of course, as you've seen, those resources are posted for sessions coming up, so you have access to those. And of course, finally, please, please share feedback with me on the session tonight. I want to make sure that all these sessions really resonate and support you. And we'll get that link in there. Oh, Adam, of course, already put our link in. So please take a moment, give me some feedback. Really want to know what we should keep doing, what we should change. This is your time, and I want to make sure it fits for you. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening. I'll stay on for a few minutes if you have any questions, but it was great to hear from all of you again. I'm making my own notes. I'm learning from you guys so much as well. Thank you so much. Get some rest. I know there's a lot of tired people. Perfect. I've appreciated the personal email. Oh, you're so welcome, everybody. Please email me back if you need anything. Please, please, you have my email address. Take care. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a great night.
You too. You too. Take care, Julie. Great to see
Thank
you.
you.
Adam, thank you so much. Excellent as always.
I try. I actually have a question. Someone that came in didn't know this was like the first session, and they were curious if you were going to be doing this like again.
Oh, starting the whole thing again?
Yeah.
I probably, I know Kristen has asked me if I will, so I'm sure I will start the whole thing again. It will be, I mean, it'll be based on if Setsi wants to run it again, but yeah,
Exactly.
I would love to. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I was just talking to her she was messaging me back and forth, and I told her to access the previous document, the link, I believe 3, because it had all that stuff information, the step 1, 2, 3, 4. And so she's like, yep, accessing that right now. And I'm like, that's great. And I will just ask at the end, if you stick around, maybe you can find out. But I want to know if someone else asks that such a question again at another meeting, I can just be like maybe she'll do another one. It'll just depend, but it will be probably next year.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, and that would be a great thing to put in the feedback so I can tell Kristen, yeah, I think we have more people that will want to join in. Perfect. Thank you so much. Super appreciate your help as always.
No problem.
Good luck with this quarter of school.
I'll do my best.
All right. Hopefully I'll see you soon. February.
Hopefully.
All
February.
right. Yes. All right. Take care. Take care. Thanks.
Take care.
Bye-bye.